Once again, taking your Bibles and turning to Colossians chapter 3, verse 23 and 24. And whatsoever ye do, do it heartily as to the Lord, and not unto men, knowing that of the Lord ye shall receive the reward of the inheritance, for ye serve the Lord Christ. So we're going to be looking at the second part of diligence versus slothfulness. And we're going to be looking at slothfulness this morning. Slothfulness means that an individual is habitually idle and lazy. Slothful people are reluctant to work and rarely accomplish anything noteworthy. It is an abominable sin for a Christian to be guilty of sloth. So what we want to look at then is the symptoms of slothfulness. Slothfulness is marked by a dislike toward work and a spirit of laziness. A slothful man justifies his behavior in his own mind, making up a variety of excuses is why he can't work on a consistent basis. Now turn over, if you would, to Proverbs 26. Proverbs 26, and look at verse 13. There actually talks here about a slothful man. The slothful man saith, there is a lion in the way, a lion is in the streets. As the door turneth upon his hinges, so doth the slothful upon his bed. The slothful hideth his hand in his bosom. He grieveth him to bring it again to his mouth. A sluggard is wiser in his own conceit than 7 men that can render a reason. So a slothful man is so conceited, he thinks others should provide for him. Now, we live in a country like that, sad to say. If you remember back a couple presidents ago, people said, are you going to vote for this man? I won't speak his name, but will you vote for this man? They said, yeah, we get free stuff, free phones, free food, free housing. So if you're going to give people that stuff, then they're going to be slothful. They're going to be lazy. They're going to be unwilling to work. So, in a way, society makes a man slothful in many ways. I mean, men can be slothful without having a reason to be that way. But when you give them a reason and give him everything, then this is what happens. One of the most telltale symptoms of slothfulness is an excessive love for sleep and relaxation. Turning back to Proverbs there in verse 6. Proverbs verse 6 and verse 9. How long wilt thou sleep, O sluggard? When wilt thou arise out of thy sleep? Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall thy poverty come as one that travaileth, and thy want as an armed man. Then turn over to chapter 10 of Proverbs. And verse 5, it says, He that gathereth in the summer is a wise son, but he that sleepeth in harvest is a son that causeth shame. Then turn over to chapter 19 and verse 15. (19) and verse 15, slothfulness casteth into a deep sleep, and an idle soul shall suffer hunger. Then in chapter 20, verse 13, love not sleep, lest thou come to poverty. Open thine eyes, and thou shalt be satisfied with bread. And chapter 24 and verse 33 and 34. Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep, so shall thy poverty come as one that travaileth, and thy want as an armed man. Now hold your place there in Proverbs. So we see here that it is unhealthy in the physical and spiritual realm for an individual to spend a majority of their time in slumber. You don't get anything accomplished when you do that. Everyone needs ample rest, we know that, but lazy people make sleep an idol. They rarely rise up early and have little respect for time or profitability of labor. I wish that was the case with me. I'm always up early. Sometimes my wife's earlier than I am. Turning back to Proverbs chapter 12, a slothful man rarely finishes a task. Proverbs 12:27. The slothful man roasteth not that which he took in honey, but the substance of a diligent man is precious. He also does not take care of what he does own. Look at verse 24, or chapter 24, and verse 30 and 31. I went by the field of the slothful, and by the vineyard of the man void of understanding. And lo, it was all grown over with thorns, and nettles had covered the face thereof, and the stone wall thereof was broken down. So we see there that there is a need to take care of what you own. And, it even, as I mentioned last week, even more so the house of God. We can't let it run down and just, stand there and rot away. We have a church up in Mansfield, and they built this extravagant building. It probably is at least $1 million, if not more. They couldn't finish it because they had a church split. And in the process, they owed this contractor the money, and they had a big dispute about it. It was even on the news. Now it's an eyesore, and the neighbors wanted it tore down. And the pastor of that church insisted that they were going to get back into it. So it's probably been, I'm going to just take a guess, 10, 15 years it's been standing there. It was a unique looking building, and I'm sure their idea behind it all was in good conscience, but it's nothing now. It's just there. I don't even think you could go in there and do anything with it because it's been sitting empty for so long. So I don't know what the end results are, but they should have did something with it. Ecclesiastes 10 in verse 18. By much slothfulness the building decayeth, and through idleness of the hands the house droppeth through. So we can see that we do nothing with our own homes or with the house of God, that what is going to happen. As a slothful man squanders away his time, his mind is engaged in covetous thoughts that are very destructive. Go back and look at chapter 21 there once again. In verse 25 and 26, the desire of the slothful killeth him, for his hands refuse to labor. He covereth greedily all the day long, but the righteous giveth and spareth not. Slothful people usually are apt to fall for a get-rich-quick scheme that require little or no work at all. Look at chapter 28 and verse 22. He that hasteth to be rich hath an evil eye, and considereth not that poverty shall come upon him. So we can see here, there is a lot of scriptures dealing with slothfulness. And as I said before at the outset, that it's an abomination. It's an abomination, a sinful abomination to be in this way. And you can't, as a Christian, I don't see how you can do it. But there's plenty of evidence here that they do exist. The slothful man does exist. It is a terrible shame that the symptoms of slothfulness abound in present-day America. And I think as I mentioned it earlier, we all can see that slothfulness. And that's why we're in the shape we're in right now. And just about every place you go, you can see slothfulness. We were talking about this the other day, and my daughter has a good one when she goes through a fast food drive-through. She's waiting, and gets up to the window and says, "So much for fast food." But they can't get good help. They can't get somebody that has a care. They don't care about you. They don't care about the food. My wife stopped at Arby's the other day. Got us a sandwich and a milkshake. Guy 3 times to get it right. The milkshake. 3 times. And then he practically threw it at her that it got all over her coat and car and everything else. So there's no care. And that's a slothful person. Of course, they're in there just yakking away and because they don't care. I mean, that's pretty much the bottom line. They just don't care anymore. People don't care. They don't care about you. They don't care about your service. They don't care about trying to, be a good host or whatever to try to give you, you're paying for all this. So they should be, have the ability to do that, but they don't. And it's because our government has put it in a place. It's like they had a guy on the news, and this guy's going around Cleveland on a Harley Davidson motorcycle, and he's all covered. He's got heavy, attire on, and he's got his hood up, the mask on, so you can't tell who it is. And he's got a crowbar, and he's going around, and he's smashing the front door window, and he's crawling through, and he's grabbing whatever he can grab. Well, this case, the guy, he grabbed a cash register off the counter. And the guy owned an auto shop, and he was in business for himself. And he said, "We got a sign right out there that says, 'Help needed.'" And he said, "If the guy wants a job, all he has to do is ask." He said, "But now I'm out $3,000 of my own money." So, and this is, whoever this guy is continue on doing this. One showed he did it, and the alarm went off, and he took off. He didn't get inside. And the newscaster asked him, he said, would you hire him? He said, no, not now. Not after he stole from him, which I don't blame him. But this is just a little taste of what our country's become, because we have those in the higher power that said, oh, yeah, give him this, give him that. And when you have all these people coming over from other countries, they don't have the same rules as we have. See, we have to obey the law and abide by the law and abide by the rules laid down in this country. And they don't have to. See, they don't have to do any of that. And it's like that when you sit down and you analyze all this, you know, there's still some out there that I guess, not to be derogatory or anything, but I think they're still living in a dream world to think that we can get this all changed around, everything go back the way it was. If you're one of those people, then you're living in a dream world, because it's not going to happen. I think Brother Gordon put it best once. He said they got their head stuck in the sand. You can't see it. See, if you're one of them, then you got a real problem, because it's happening. It's not going to get any better. I mean, I'd love to see it turn around. But we know where we're at. We know where we're at scripturally. We know where we're at physically. And it's just not going to be turned around. Many children are handed everything without requiring them to labor for it. I remember my grandmother used to tell my mom says, well, don't give it to him. Make him work for it. Because if he works for it, then he'll appreciate it a little bit better. See, if you just give it to me, then I wouldn't treat it that well or with respect. And if I had to buy it, the whole thing changes, see. So, our grandparents were wiser above measure. Few see the importance and profitability of hard work. I mean, they don't see any profit in hard work. But if you want to get anywhere or do anything in today's society, or even when I was back working before I retired, hard work. And I never minded it. I never once complained about hard work. There may have been some jobs I was on I didn't like, but it was never nothing about hard work. Our current welfare system is often abused by lazy men who would rather sponge off the government than get a job. And that's where we're at. There's up there in Ontario where we do most of our shopping, there's a Denny's on the corner. And there's a guy there, I don't know if he's still there or not, but the last few years he's been there on that corner every day. He's always there. And he's asking for a job. He's asking for food. And so the manager of Denny's comes out and offers him a job. And he wouldn't take it. People would stop and give him food. And at the end of his shift, let's put it that way, at the end of his shift, he would leave and there was the food. So people need to get it in their, you really hate to be this way. But we really have that problem many times with the church. The people want a handout. That's all they want. And if you don't put, a squeeze on that, then you're just asking for a can of worms. But are those people out there that's all they want. They just want whatever they can get from the church. I get the calls all the time. They find out, get our number, and they call, and they had one call me 3 times from Delaware. So, that's a pretty piece away. And, same thing. And I just tell them, because they hem-haw around, Oh, I just got out of prison, and I'm trying to find what God wants me to do. And I said, well, what do you want God to do for you? I'll talk to him for a little bit, because I know what the end result is. And he just said, well, I'm just, I'm really having a difficult time and blah, blah, blah. And I says, well, if you're asking for money, we don't do that. Click. That's all it takes. So you know what their call was about. If people are unwilling to work, they should not expect a free lunch. In 2 Thessalonians 3:10, give you a second to turn there. 2 Thessalonians 3:10, for even when we were with you, Paul's speaking here, this we commanded you, that if any would not work, neither should he eat. So Paul give this, and I'm a stickler on this, and you're going to find that out in the morning's message, because I've about had it up to here with some of this. And this is one right here. Oh yeah, I don't believe that. Paul says right there, it's a commandment. I left you a commandment. Where did he get that commandment? Did he just dream it up? Did he just think of it of himself? So there comes a time when we need to put the brakes on. And we need to understand the scriptures. And my brother Chuck was telling me, he says, there's a couple things he couldn't find, but he's reading scriptures and trying to get a few things there, and where are these things at? It takes some time, and basically sometimes you have to find a book. You have to find a book written by somebody that has that information in it. And a lot of times if you just get on the internet now, it'll tell you. We don't have to hunt and search like we used to, and back in the 80s, and that. Right now everything's pretty well. If you want to find it, you can find it. In fact, I actually got the whole list of every apostle that died, when he died, and how he died. How he was martyred. And we all know that John was the only one that died a natural death. The rest of them were martyred. So Brother Ross wrote this. He says, I agree with the truth of the old poem which says, a good-for-nothing, lazy lout, wicked within and ragged without, who can bear to have him about. Turn him out. Turn him out. And then he went on to state, Brother Ross went on to state, he also stated, he says, I agree with what C.H. Spurgeon wrote. Now, when I come across C.H. Spurgeon and things like this, I have to stop and say, do you realize that was back in 1800s? Many of the things that Spurgeon taught and preached about are no different than today. It's hard to believe that they had the same issues and the same problems back in the 1800s, well, even back before, because we can see it in the scriptures, right? But just think, we think, well, Spurgeon lived back in a time when everything was fine. No, it wasn't fine. Not according to him. But here's what Spurgeon said. Hard work is the grand secret of success. Nothing but rags and poverty can come from idleness. Elbow grease is the only stuff to make gold with. No sweat, no sweet. He who would have the crow's eggs must climb the tree. shirt sleeves rolled up, led on the best broadcloth, and he who is not ashamed of the apron will soon be able to do without it. So it's pretty wise words. We see the scriptures very plain when it comes to slothfulness. And people don't take note. Many people we worked with at GM, many, claim to be Christians. One in particular. Somebody asked him one time, "Where are you working today?" "Oh, clear across to the other side of the building." "Doing what?" "Troubleshooting a line." "Well, why aren't you there?" "Well, I just had things to do and just felt like walking around." "Well, what if your line goes down?" "Oh, God will find somebody to fix it." So, what kind of respect does people have for that man who calls himself a Christian? So a Christian that comes along and is doing the right thing is not going to get the respect from that person because of what he's already experienced. And he wasn't the only one. Plant manager caught the one guy, every morning, he'd lean himself up against the press. Work has started. Leaning himself up against the press on a chair and had his feet up with his shoes off in the plant, on the main floor. And the plant manager had come by several times, and he told him, "If I see it again once more," he said, "you're out of here. And this don't happen because you got the union." And the union was very protective of this guy. They fired him. You can get by. You can get by. But it comes time that it's like, okay, I drove forklift for quite a long time. And I was a good worker. I'm not patting myself on the back. I just was a good worker. And my supervisor come over, he says, "Can you get this for me? Can you do this for me? I'll give you 2 hours of overtime." That's how they kind of settled it. And I don't mind doing it, okay? But I had to question him. I says, "Okay, where's the guy that's supposed to be there to do it?" "Well, I don't know where he's at." I said, "Yes, you do." I said, "Everybody knows where he's at. He's upstairs playing poker and losing his paycheck." I said, "You don't have enough guts to go up there and get him and bring him down to the floor." "Well, come on, man, can you just get this for me?" That was his reply. And I got it. But that's where it was at. My dad was in payroll. And the wives would come in. Says, "Why didn't my husband get a check?" So my dad would check, He says, "Well, ma'am, he did get a check." "Well, he said he didn't get a check, that you guys didn't pay him." "Well, yeah, we paid him." Then he'd get the book out and he'd show him where he paid. Well, what happened was he lost his whole paycheck up in the cafeteria gambling. So, see, they're spending their time, they're at work getting paid, and they're spending their time trying to make big bucks, gambling, but not putting in the hard days later. So now we can see why our country's in the shape it's in. You're dismissed.